Hey everybody, Beatles Anthology. I'm going to be talking about my top 15 moments from these three albums. So a few nights ago I did my first ever live stream, and during it there was quite a bit of talk about the Beatles Anthology, and it got me thinking about what are my favourite moments from the anthology. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention that over the next few weeks, while there's all this craziness going on, I'm going to be doing these live streams on a Wednesday night, 9 PM UK time. And it's just really to give people an hour. If you're stuck in your homes, if you're not getting a chance to speak to people as often as you normally would, then there's a chance to come along, and I'm just going to talk for a bit basically, and if you want to fire over questions, have a discussion about anything, please do so. And that video has generated me thinking about this, my top 15 anthology moments. So at number 15, I've gone with Searching, which was one of the Decca audition songs from the 1st of January 1962. So a 1957 song originally done by the Coasters. And I think the reason that I really like this one is just that it's sort of one of those legendary songs in the Beatles early period that has been talked about in interviews, certainly by Paul, about something that was sort of really important to him in those early days of the Beatles. And actually when he was on the Desert Island Discs programme on the BBC in 1982, which is a famous programme, it's been going for decades on the radio, where famous people come along and they sort of say what items they would take with them to a desert island, and this was one of the records that he chose to take with him. So that's my number 15. Number 14, it's a really early Paul McCartney song. I think it was one of the first songs credited to Lennon and McCartney. It's Like Dreamers Do, which appeared on Anthology 1 from the Decca audition, 1st of January 1962. So there's a few things that sort of interest me about this one. First of all, the Decca audition anyway, I'm just sort of really interested in that. I also like the fact that it was on New Year's Day. You couldn't really imagine that sort of happening these days. Something as important as that happening on New Year's Day. But that's just sort of what seemed to happen back then. They even played top football matches on Christmas Day back then. And as well, this song went on to be recorded by the Applejacks in 1964. And it just sort of makes you think, well, how did that come about? Because, you know, Paul surely wasn't publicising this song. It wasn't one that he ever said he had a particularly high opinion of. So how did it get known by people? But the Applejacks did record it for Decca, so I wonder if there's somebody around at Decca who sort of remembered it from the audition and maybe enjoyed it, and somehow sort of put them in touch with the song of Paul's for them to record. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but it intrigues me how the Applejacks got the song in '64. But anyway, I find it a really interesting song to listen to, because you can hear the nerves in Paul's voice. He's obviously not used to being in a studio at that point. In a similar way to Love Me Do, the single version, where you can sort of almost hear his voice cracking with nerves. But yeah, number 14, Like Dreamers Do, is one that I've always enjoyed. Please leave me some comments down below about what your favourite moments are from the anthology. Would love to hear from you as always. So at number 13, from Anthology 3, it's George's early demo of Something. So it's the genesis of the songs there, but there's some parts of it that are quite different that didn't make it into the final cut, and it's just him and an acoustic guitar, so he really sort of brings out the melody of the guitar riff, really comes through nicely in just the chords that he's playing on the guitar. But you can also tell that he's really feeling it, is George. It's a really important song for him. You can tell he's feeling it quite sort of spiritually, I think, as he sings it, and just a really gorgeous version of what went on to become one of his all-time classic songs. At number 12, it's an old Mexican song from 1940, and its English title means Kiss Me a Lot. It's Besame Mucho, and the version that's on Anthology 1 is from the 6th of June 1962 session that the Beatles did, the first session that they did for George Martin. And it was always thought and assumed that, according to the stories, that George brought them into the studio so that he could hear them play, and that they were then signed to Parlophone. But Mark Lewison, in his big books, is it up there? Yeah, up there. He seems to have uncovered it as a slightly different story. He thinks that the Beatles were already actually signed at this point, and he has documentation that supposedly proves this. So I believe it did lead to a bit of a falling out between him and George Martin, a falling out that wasn't resolved before George died, unfortunately. But anyway, back to the subject of Besame Mucho. So they'd done this at the Decca audition. They were still doing it 5 months later at EMI. So it was a song that they clearly had had good feelings for. Even so much as they went and did versions of it in the Get Back sessions, Let It Be sessions in January 1969. So they were still playing around with the song even then, even though it was a sort of quite as a jokey thing that they did it. But I just think it's a lot of fun. It's a good fun pop song to listen to, and that's Besame Mucho. Number 11 from Anthology 3, it's a White Album outtake of Rocky Raccoon. I've always really enjoyed this one, the way that Paul's still sort of writing the lyrics to it. The story's a little bit different, and he makes a mess up of it part way through, where he says that the doctor was sminking of gin. I presume he started off saying smelling and changed it to stinking, and then he plays on that. He doesn't let the song die at that point. He keeps it going, and it's just good fun. It's nice to hear a different take on the lyrics for that, and it's one again that I've always really enjoyed. At number 10, it's not so much for the song, it's more what comes before it. It's the Beatles with Eric and Ernie, Morecambe and Wise from Anthology 1. So they did a comedy skit with Eric and Ernie first, and then went on to sing Moonlight Bay. The Moonlight Bay bit I'm not that bothered about, but what comes before it, I don't know if you're aware, if you're not in the UK, just how big Morecambe and Wise were. They were just two of the biggest comedy stars that this country's ever produced, absolute legends. And they do a really funny skit where, John's sort of saying, you've only got a little dad, have you? No, sorry, Eric says that, doesn't he? And George is, we're the ones with the big fat hairy heads. And it's just great fun, just showing sort of the sort of music hall traditions that the Beatles had, and the way that they were sort of loved for how funny they were as well as the music. So that's my number 10. At number 9, it's another song from the Decca audition, 1st of January 1962. It's Three Cool Cats, the Lieber and Stoller song from 1958, which was originally sung by the Coasters. And it's another song that shows the sort of comedy traditions that the Beatles had. Great sort of interplay on the vocals between George, Paul and John, with sort of John doing the "Hey man, save one chick for me" part. And yeah, just great fun. You can sort of understand that it maybe wasn't regarded as the future of music by Decca, but it was certainly a good fun tune for them to do, and it's something that I always really enjoy on Anthology 1. Number 8, this is a song that dates back to 1921, and it had been a sort of a jazz standard. Parts of the lyric had appeared in The Great Gatsby in 1925. I'm talking about The Sheik of Araby, which again is from the Decca audition on the 1st of January 1962. George takes lead vocals here, and again it's just another example of a really fun song that they were doing at the time. You can imagine that it would have been one that was probably a staple of them when they were playing in Hamburg. You've got those 8-hour sessions to do, and you just need to fill it with all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it's great fun where you've got John sort of going half at the end of the verses, and yeah, really good fun. At number 7, this one's a bit of a mystery. The mystery is, why on earth did it get abandoned and not released as a Beatles song? From Anthology 3, All Things Must Pass, so one of George's sort of early studio versions of that song, and it's a real nice stripped down version of it. He's just using I think it's a bit like a sort of a tremolo effect on his guitar that he's using, and again he's still working the song out as he plays it, but it's a really, really nice version, quite far removed from what appeared as the title track of the All Things Must Pass album in 1970. But still the genesis of a really great song there, and obviously one that Paul McCartney must have liked or thought about for a long time, because it's one of the songs that he performed at the concert for George a year after George died. At number 6, it's 2 songs combined into one. From the White Album sessions, and on Anthology 3, it's Step Inside Love, Los Paranoias. So Step Inside Love was one of Paul's songs which he gave to Cilla Black, and she had a massive hit with that, and it was a song that she became really well known for. But this was Paul's sort of early demo of it, and really nice sounding song. And then as the song breaks down, you hear John say Los Paranoias, and Paul has a laugh and just goes into this little jam, and he introduces the band as, Joe Pereri and the Pereri Wallflowers, and it's just a nice little fun jam, credited to all 4 Beatles. Weirdly, I don't know why that is, because George wasn't even there, he had nothing to do with it. I guess it was just one of those that probably nobody wrote it, so they put it down as them all having written it. But that phrase, Los Paranoias, The Beatles nearly used that in Abbey Road on Sun King, you know, where John's coming up with all this sort of Spanish, Portuguese sounding phrases. That was apparently they toyed with the idea of using that. And that phrase stuck with John on Mind Games a few years later. One of the instruments was credited as being played by Los Paranoias. So yeah, it's a phrase that stuck, but it's just a good fun little part of Anthology 3. Number 5 and number 4, it's actually two different versions of the same song. So it's Strawberry Fields Forever and John's sort of first versions of these, which were one of the absolute highlights of getting to hear those finally after them being sort of so mythical for years, well, for those of us that didn't have them on bootleg anyway. So at number 5 I've gone with Take One, which was the first version done at Abbey Road, and it's just got that sort of very simple keyboard, simple electric guitar backing behind it, and John just singing it really nicely. And it was sort of that first version really before they built it up into something that became absolutely massive by the time they'd finished with it. But just ahead of that, at number 4, I've gone with the original demo version of John's. It's just him and an acoustic guitar. It's very sort of lo-fi. I assume it was some sort of home demo, and it's just John singing it gorgeously. And there's that bit in it where it sort of breaks down and he says, "I can't do it," and you can tell that it's a song that's special to him and he's determined to sort of get the very best from it that he can, but that was just the beautiful, simple early version of it. Okay, we're into the top 3. I had absolutely no hesitation in choosing these three songs as my top 3. Just easiest decision to make. And all 3 of these songs were actually used at the end of episodes of the Anthology TV series, film, whatever you want to call it. So the first one is from the Beatles for Sale sessions, and I have absolutely no idea why they didn't use this. It's bizarre to me. It's Leave My Kitten Alone. Just a fantastic rocker sung by John. I mean, it's up there with some of the great rock covers, some of the great cover songs that they were doing at the time. So I don't understand, did they not think that it fitted in with the vibe of Beatles for Sale or not? I'm not quite sure, but, you know, I think there's plenty of songs on Beatles for Sale that you could have taken out and put Leave My Kitten Alone in, and it would have improved the album. Not that it's not a great album anyway, but yeah, that's an absolute shoo-in for my top 3, Leave My Kitten Alone. And then at number 2, from the Revolver sessions, it's And Your Bird Can Sing. Absolutely joyous version of the song. I love this version so much. It's got a very different melody to the final version that appeared on Revolver, so they had it as quite a different song originally. But this melody's so good. I'd be really intrigued to know what prompted them to change it to the version that they ended up with, which was still a great version, but it intrigues me that they thought it needed changing. But anyway, the version that we've got at the end of one of the Anthology episodes that's on Anthology 2, it's just an absolute riot. You'll remember this sort of breaking down, giggling. I'm sure they were high on stuff at the time, quite likely, but something was happening that was just causing them to be in absolute fits of giggles. How they got through the song, I have no idea, but it just sounds absolutely superb, and it would have been great to have had a sort of a proper version with that melody. I doubt such a thing exists, but there you go. Absolutely no hesitation. That's my number 2. So here we are at number 1, my favourite moment from the Anthology CDs, and it's a song that is from Anthology 3. It's a song by George, and it's one that later went on to become something much more massive than what it started out as, but this was his sort of original studio demo version. It's a song that later appeared on the Love album, and it was actually the only song on the Love album where they recorded brand new music for it. I think you know where I'm going with this. It's While My Guitar Gently Weeps, his original version of that, and I almost wish that they hadn't made it into the song that they did make it into, which sounds crazy because it's such a classic, but by doing that they denied us being able to hear this for sort of 30 years, and I was always sort of a bit annoyed with that for a long time, but it's absolutely gorgeous, and without a doubt it's my number 1 song from the Anthology discs. So as always, I'd love to know what you think, what your favourites from the Anthology are they similar to mine at all? Let me know in the comments, and thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again sometime. Bye bye.